everyone, welcome to History on Trial. This is Dr. Tracy McCarthy, psychologist, attorney, and educator. We are going to be venturing down the road of Caribbean history shortly. And so we are going to be talking about colonization related to the Caribbean, slavery, servitude, convict transportation, political prisoners, removals, and deportation. So we're going to be talking about that whole history, but this is going to set the stage for that discussion. And so we're going to start off with a discussion about food and some myths about food in America. It's important to remember that food is culture. So in terms of understanding your culture, your heritage, it's important to understand the history of food. And so sometimes if you trace the origins of food that you desire, that you have an appetite for, that you have a pattern of eating, if you trace the origin of it and the processing and preparation of it, it might give you some insight into not only your ancestry, but the ancestry of others. It gives you some insight into ethnicity. It's really a big heritage marker because people pretty much take food with them and then pass it down through time. And so that's what culture is all about also, is sort of passing things down through generations. And so we are going to look at 4 important food products in America that have been misappropriated. And one of the issues with misappropriation or cultural appropriation is that what ends up happening is that people get erased. And so cultures get erased, ancestry gets erased. And so it's very important to hold on to what is actually your culture and your ancestral heritage and allow the ancestral heritage of others to be their ancestral heritage. And sometimes when people are really trying to figure out who they are, there may be culture grabs. And so there may be a tendency to grab all sorts of pieces of other cultures, claiming them for one's own in order to feel whole. But you have to be careful about that, because when you do that, then you change your own ancestry and your heritage. You change your own narrative. And if this appears on anything other than Dr. Tracy McCarthy, it is stolen and unauthorized. Let's get started. One of the important things when you are trying to understand heritage and history and culture and identity is to sometimes suspend judgment and also for a moment suspend some of the beliefs that you may have had or entertained in the past related to culture, because sometimes what people have been told may not be accurate. And when it comes to food for certain groups of people in the Americas, those who were colonized or enslaved, there is sometimes a misunderstanding about the history of food and the food products and the uses of the foods. And one important dynamic is this idea that certain foods were created during slavery, and they were created only for enslaved people because they were the least desired foods. And so we are going to look to see if that is actually accurate. Of course, it's not accurate. Otherwise, we wouldn't be doing a video discussion about it. But we're going to start off with deep fried turkey. Now, turkey originates in the Americas and then it was exported into Europe. However, there is a way of preparing the turkey in terms of deep frying it that originated in the Americas. And so we're going to quickly look at that. And then we're going to quickly look at how some other foods originated in ways that you might not have thought about in the past. And again, this is setting the stage for that discussion about Caribbean history, colonization, servitude, deportations. So this is going to serve as a foundation for a lot of that. And so we're going to start off with the turkey as promised. Now, because the turkey originated in the Americas, there may be the presumption that all dishes related to turkey also originated with the American Indians, with the indigenous people. Some things, however, came about through what would be considered a creolized dynamic, and so a mixed dynamic, mixed cultures, mixed ethnicities. With fried turkey, this came about through a chef. His name was Justin Wilson, and he was a Cajun chef and used to be on television. And one of the things that he made was this fried turkey. And so this became a big Southern delicacy, a big sensation. For those of you who are not familiar with Cajuns, those were French colonists who settled in Canada, pretty much in Nova Scotia, back in the 1600s. And they also migrated into Louisiana. And of course, Louisiana had the strong French heritage, so that was a very welcoming place for a number of Cajun people. Also, Cajuns are related to the idea of being French and Indian sometimes. So you will see that dynamic going on. And so again, that's that sort of creolized identity. But so that's the origin of fried turkey. Now, some people might, of course, think that fried turkey came about some other way. If you are aware of another way that fried turkey came about and you have evidence of that to support it, put it in the comment section, share it with everyone so that we can all see it and get a better understanding. But as for now, this is what we have. And there may be an assumption that the American Indians created it and they were sitting around eating fried turkey, but there is no support for that at this point in time. Of course, you had hundreds of Indian nations, and so it might be difficult to pinpoint, an exact nation that was doing this at earlier times. However, right now what we have is this is a Cajun dynamic from Louisiana. And now we're going to look at the chicken. This is turkey's little friend. Some people might assume because turkeys originated in the Americas that chickens did also. However, they did not. And so we're going to look at where chickens came from, how they got to America. And then we're going to look at the preparation of chicken. And we're going to dispel a myth, a cultural myth about the origin of fried chicken. Now, unlike turkey that originated in the Americas, the chicken originated in Southeast Asia, and the domestic version of this found its way to the Americas through the Portuguese. Now, you may recall that the Portuguese were very, very, very busy running all around the world, doing all sorts of things, and one of the things that they were involved in was slave trading. And so they brought the chickens over from Africa in the 16th century. And they've done research on the chickens to determine the similarity between the chickens in the Americas and chickens in other places. And one interesting dynamic is that they found a similarity between the chickens in the Americas and the chicken in Spain at the same time. So now that it's clear that there are different origins for the chicken and the turkey, we can now look at also how the chicken was prepared and how it came to be prepared the way that it is famously prepared, which is fried chicken. Now, again, many people think that fried chicken originated in slavery, that this is something that was created in America, that's very American food, American pastime food. It's as American as apple pie. However, that is not the accurate history for fried chicken. And so we are going to look at the history of fried chicken, how it originated, and how it made its way to the Americas. And here we have it. Fried chicken was invented by the Scottish. So it was brought over from Scotland and taken to the Caribbean islands and also mainland America. Now, of course, there was such a heavy influx of Scottish people into the southern portion of the United States. This would account for why it was so popular in the southern part of the United States and also into the Caribbean. And so there were other places that did other things with chicken and also fried foods in different places. However, fried chicken as we know it was invented by the Scottish. Now, parts of Africa also did some frying in terms of chicken, but the chicken that we know of, that we use in America, this was brought over by the Scottish. And now let's turn our attention to this very controversial food known as chitterlings, also chitlins. There is a belief that chitlins pretty much originated in the South of America. There is a belief that this food item came about because those who were enslaving people would cast off this food. This was a portion of the pig or the hog that they did not want. And so therefore they would give this to enslaved people to eat. The problem with this theory is that in England, in Scotland, in Ireland, in Europe, basically, chitlins were considered a delicacy. And so the insides of animals were treasured in many parts of the world. In fact, Scotland's national dish is haggis, and it sort of looks like a sausage, and it's stuffed with the insides of a sheep. It can also be a pig or a cow, but it's stuffed with the animal's heart, liver, lungs. And so this idea of the inside of the animal being reserved as a delicacy has a pretty long history. Also in Europe, tripe was pretty popular and also considered a delicacy. And so we really need to start looking at some other explanations for why enslaved people had access to this delicacy, why they had access to it, why they were able to spend so much time preparing it, because it takes quite a bit to prepare chitlins. And so where would that time have come from to prepare these chitlins? And also, where would the idea to give enslaved people these delicacies, where would that idea come from? So again, you have this history of chitlins. It did not start with slavery. It started as a delicacy and continues, these innards continue as a delicacy around the world and definitely in Europe. And here you see the production of chitlins in the Caribbean and this distribution. And so even though you have these different historical narratives related to slavery in the Caribbean and in mainland America, you still have this consumption of this delicacy, chitlins, and also you see the discussion about the chitlins in Ireland. And so again, this is not something that was created out of slavery, and people need to take a little bit more time to really find out the history of these foods, the culture of these foods, and why certain groups of people may be drawn to these foods. The assumption, of course, is that it comes from slavery, but once you find out that that is not accurate, then you have to go to, okay, so why does this particular cultural group crave or desire this particular food, and why is this such an integral part of certain cultures? And we're going to wrap up with a quick discussion related to hoghead cheese and haggis. You are encouraged to do a little bit more research related to hoghead cheese and haggis. Talk to your family members. If your family served either of these dishes or any of the dishes that we've talked about, start to ask them, where did they get the idea for this dish? Who taught them to actually make this? You might be surprised by the answers. What you do know now is that you do need to question theories and myths related to food and the culture of food. And you have to be very careful about appropriating histories of food, because when you appropriate the history of food and attribute it to something that's not accurate, then it sort of throws history off. It can throw your own history off. It can throw the general history of your particular culture or your society off. And so you have to be very clear about where these foods came from. Same thing with music and dance, language, all of the things that relate to culture. And so you do want to get an accurate understanding of the origins of these things, because once you do that, you get a better understanding of your own heritage, your own ancestry, and you may be surprised by the answers that you come up with once you start to ask some questions. And so you can ask your parents and your grandparents and your great-grandparents about any of these foods and their understanding of how they came to like the foods, make the foods. Did someone teach them about these foods? If you have family members that were eating haggis, hoghead cheese, chitterlings, chitlins, it might not be tied to slavery the way that you may have been led to believe that that's where it came from. So again, knowledge is power. Take care. See you soon.